Good morning or good afternoon. I've been asked to talk about why we should bother to develop reduced crude protein diets. And well, at least in my opinion, there are compelling reasons why we should strive very hard to successfully develop reduced crude protein diets. So this will only be short, but I think it's important because it's the rationale as to why we should be looking in this direction. Okay, what is a reduced crude protein diet? Well, essentially, a crude protein diet is going to contain more wheat or feed grain, more wheat, less protein meal, soybean meal, essentially. So we've got in this, these are real diets that we used in one of our experiments. In this particular study, we reduced the crude protein from 22.2% down to 16.5%. And that was achieved by increasing wheat by 43%, by reducing soybean meal by a whopping 84%. It's also worth noting that to keep the diets energetic, the amount of added oil, or vegetable oil in this case, that comes down quite a bit. And the big difference is that, okay, juggling the wheat and soybean meal, that reduces your crude protein, but to meet your amino acid requirements, that's when you add non-bound or crystalline or synthetic amino acids, and they've gone up by nearly a 7-fold factor, from 7.5 grams per kilogram in your standard protein diet up to nearly 50 grams per kilogram in your reduced crude protein diet. Now, the only the only place where starch can come from in a broiler diet is from the feed grain. And as you can see, the starch concentration in this diet went up by 42%, virtually exactly the same as the increase in wheat. And as a result of that, the dietary starch to protein ratio, that increased by nearly a 2-fold factor. And we don't think that increase in dietary starch protein ratios, we're really beginning to think that is not a good look. Okay, so why should we reduce the crude protein contents of a diet? Okay, in a nutshell, there'll be less environmental pollution from both nitrogen and ammonia. There will be better litter quality, and as a result of that, there'll be less foot pad lesions, hot burns, breast blisters. Reduced crude protein diet, there'll be less undigested protein flowing into the hind gut, and that could fuel the proliferation of potential pathogens, including, most notably, Clostridium perfringens, which is, of course, the cause of necrotic enteritis. As a result, better flock health. Also, we feel that as methionine, threonine, and lysine, as their prices in real terms have come down over the decades, we think that this will happen to the additional non-bound amino acids, and ultimately the economic feasibility will be increased. And last, but by no means least, less dependence on imported soybean meal. In a nutshell, that's it. So let's have a look at those advantages in a little bit more detail. Less nitrogen pollution. 2 papers or 2 references here, one by Andreas Lemmy, and as you can see, as he reduced dietary crude protein, the amount of nitrogen excreted, expressed as grams per bird per day, fell like a linear stone. And similarly, with Malomo, we had more of a quadratic reduction. But either which way, reduce the crude protein in the diet, you're reducing the nitrogen, amount of nitrogen excreted, and in turn, you're reducing the amount of ammonia emissions. Now, perhaps This is not a big ticket item in Australia, but it certainly is in Europe, particularly in Germany and the Netherlands. And here we have the Dutch farmers on their tractors out en masse demonstrating against government legislation. And it seems to me in the Netherlands, the government is almost trying to legislate pig and poultry production out of business. Okay, another important thing is bird welfare. And that really is a big ticket item in the UK. So in the UK, footpad scores are electronically monitored routinely when birds are processed. And if your footpad scores are excessive, a grower can be ordered to reduce his stocking density. And if that doesn't work, the grower shed can be closed down. So it is an important deal. Plus the fact that in some markets, chicken claws are the most valuable part of the bird. So you don't want them impaired. This is a marvelous paper by guys in Holland, and they look at the effect of low protein diets on this, that, and the other, including footpad scores. Now, here we have crude protein reductions from 19.8 to 18.8 to 17.8 down to 16.8. Now, those crude protein levels refer to the finisher diet, although the entire trial did run from 1 to 35 days. Interesting thing, over the entire growing period, weight gain basically didn't change. However, feed conversion ratios were improved with the reduction from 19.8% crude protein down to 16.8%. Feed conversion ratios were actually improved by very nearly 3%, which is a lot. Now, footpad scores, the lower the better. So with the reduction of dietary crude protein, footpad scores were reduced from 143 down to 39, which is an improvement of over 70%. And in association with that, you had better litter quality. Litter dry matter was increased by 12.7%, and the total amount of nitrogen in the litter was reduced by nearly 13%. And on necrotic enteritis, which is a seriously big no-no, on necrotic enteritis caused by Clostridium perfringens, I think a lot of this work was done in Canada from memory, but they looked at different protein sources on the incidence of Clostridium perfringens in the gut, and they used both fish meal and soy protein concentrate. Now, the protein levels are pretty stratospheric, 23% and 40%. That is a high protein diet. But either which way, reducing dietary crude protein from 40 to 23% reduced Clostridium perfringens in the ileum by 54%, and it reduced Clostridium perfringens populations in the cecum, in the large gut, by 44%. Now, hopefully we'll be repeating this, some of our colleagues will be repeating this experiment where we'll be looking at more relevant crude protein levels, but certainly the directions are pointing in just the right way. Okay, reduced dependency on imported soybean meal. Now, I see this as just the big ticket item, which might be a bit repetitious of an earlier presentation, but not to worry. Australian soybean meal imports have increased. It's astounding. Soybean meal imports into Australia, mainly from Argentina, have increased from 41,000 tonnes in 1990 to over 1 million tonnes in 2020. Now that's almost a threefold increase, and if you want to work it out, it is an average annual increase of very, very nearly 12% per annum. So one, we can reduce crude protein diets, we can reduce our dependency on imported soybean meal, and hopefully that will also attenuate the neotropical deforestation in South America. So we see, as again, I see this as a big ticket item, and in very round figures, for every 1 percentage unit of reduction in dietary crude protein, there'll be around about a 10% reduction in soybean meal inclusion. That number is going to jump around depending on the protein content of your feed grain. Now, we can quite happily reduce crude protein in the diet by up to 3 percentage units, and you saw from that Dutch study they actually got improvements in feed conversion ratios from doing that. And that alone would reduce our dependency on imported soybean meal by up to 30%, but hopefully we can get better than that. And ultimately, the successful development of reduced crude proteins could reduce the Australian chicken meat industry's dependence on imported soybean meal by up to 50%, which means we could double our current production without importing any more additional soybean meal, remembering that most of that 1.1 million tonnes, most of that would be going to the chicken meat industry at an approximate landed cost of $700 a tonne. And ultimately, when it comes to bang for your buck, these things have got to be, reduced crude protein diets have got to be economically feasible. And I think it is only reasonable to expect that the inclusion costs of amino acids like isoleucine and valine and arginine and so on with time will come down, and that will accelerate the acceptance of reduced crude protein diets. And that is about it. So thank you.